Well, thank you for tuning in. This is Hilton Milan for Divine Dude, and I'm here today with a brilliant Divine Dude, Master Shinobi. Welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate the introduction. I don't think I would describe myself as divine in particularly, but I appreciate the introduction and the sentiment.
When I was introduced to you years ago through some other friends, and it was spoken of, we know this man, Master Shinobi, and he's had some wonderful experiences throughout the world. And here we are today, and I'm asking you to share that line of divinity that I've known you to walk as an artist, well, actually, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Well, cheers, bless. If we could sort of back up a little bit first.
Yes.
And maybe cover just a tiny bit of this sense of divinity.
Yes.
This was within the context of your question, the expression of your question. So divinity is a term that has developed in English with many parallels in other languages.
Yes.
And this concept generally has the application, to my understanding, of a degree of separation, in that the notion of divinity implies that things or anything can be in a state of not divine, which, to my understanding, the tathagata, the suchness, the very nature of reality is by and of itself absolutely divine. In all of the great ocean of phenomenon, all the aspects, all the beings, all the interactions are all in essence divine. And so to conceive of any one thing being in a state of divinity that is somehow greater or lesser can potentially separate us from the actuality of the immediacy of the moment and the grandness of our place in things.
Yes.
Right? So in recognizing divine as the natural inherent state of supreme excellence that is our very reality, I would say that divinity is an inseparable concept. Similar in notion to concepts of, let's say, perfection. Right? There's a notion to an ideal that can find expression, but the expression in essence is our awareness, the direction of our awareness, the way in which we cognize, process, and experience things. So as we develop our understanding, it's not that we come closer to the divine per se, so much as we simply open ourselves up to the recognition of what is absolutely already inherently a part and aspect of all of the ocean of phenomenon. So with the notion of being able to share,
So we're all, not just everyone, but everything is divinely perfect.
well, again, perfect is the matter of perception, right?
Ah, yes. Could be a slippery slope.
There was a beautiful phrase I picked up, which was to abide in the place where heaven and hell have not yet divided. And so from a place of understanding, that dog poop on the corner is just as divine as the statue down the street, in essence. But the differential of our experience is wherein comes the notion of a divinity that is somehow more than the mundane, the subtle universe around us. Right? But again, we're delving into realms of definition here, right? So with regards to being able to share applicable things that our viewers might enjoy,
Yes.
I was hoping first to perhaps share a little of wisdom that has been passed to me from some excellent characters from around the world.
Please do, and also, please I ask your audience forgiveness. I have a guardian angel here, Stephen, who's been working with me on Divine Dude, and and is embodying that and inspires me. Thank you for joining us as we're doing your guardian work here.
Yeah, I'd like to make a comment about.
Yes.
I completely concur. The idea is that in the immanence, what's around us, what we see, hear, feel, touch, is the transcendent. They're not separated. And a Hindu saint named I think his name was Chandra. His mother couldn't find him. He was just a young boy. And he's doing his meditation on a pile of refuse. And his mother says, "Why are you doing your meditation here?" And he says, "Mother, if God is not here, he's not anywhere." That's the transcendence in the immanence, and the immanence in the transcendence. It's a different perspective on what you said. And that's something that we've talked about, is living in the present. When you're creating, you are making the immanent transcendent, and vice versa.
Nice phrasing, by the way.
And I got more to come through, but inwardly I've been told that's enough, because
Understood.
I want to hear you. I want to hear your sacred truths. Because from the little contact I've had with you, I recognize that you have them, those gems that have been polished.
Well, cheers. The credit goes to collecting the gems from other fine characters that I run into on my path, right?
Yes.
So in...
And may I begin with, Shinobi has a, even though it sounds like, one of the Jedis, and Shinobi has a meaning. Could you share that
the
with us?
context of the name?
Yes.
Sure. I'll do what I can to short form this.
Yes.
So, Shinobi is often taken in context as being a Japanese term, which
Yes.
there is a Japanese term, Shinobi, right? This is
Yes.
the derivation of the syllables.
Yes.
Shinobi. Mine is slightly different. It's Shinobi.
All
So
right.
my name is from a language from the Shinobi, the name I've received, is from language from a tribal group in the Western Amazon called
Yes.
the Shipibo Konibo. They live in an
Shipibo
area.
Konibo.
Shipibo
Shipibo
Konibo.
Konibo.
Yeah. So this is an outsider term that has grouped together two different groups of peoples.
Yes.
So my name in context, Shinobi, means in essence monkey blackfly.
Monkey
Blackfly.
blackfly.
Yeah. So the context of this is a cultural understanding that's specific to the region.
Yes.
So super long story short, the Shipibo and the Konibo are separate peoples, and I heard this story from the perspective of the Shipibo. So originally they're an independent and singular culture
Yes.
within the Amazon.
Yes.
From what can be gathered via archaeological evidence, for the most part bits of pottery with patterns on them that we can attribute to being of a specific culture,
Yes.
we can guess that if there's an accordance with the language structure, that it's maybe 3,000 to 4,000 years old. So the story as I heard it of the development of the Shipibo and the Konibo is originally the Shipibo are everyone. They are just the people, the Konibo. This is
Yes.
us, this is everyone, and the whole world is the jungle. And then one day they encounter other people, which, as you can imagine, is probably it's like a shocking first encounter for
And
the
this
whole
would be
culture.
in less than the last century.
No, this was in the 3,000-4,000 year ago mark.
Oh, yes, but
Yes,
now
the
contacting you.
They've had contact. They were contacted by the Inca,
Yes.
and they had trade agreements with the Incan Empire.
Right.
And then through them, minor encounters with the Spanish, but nothing notable. And then real first contact with the West started in maybe the 1920s, 1930s, which shows in a lot of the local tribal wear will have basically cuts that are very similar to a lot of the missionary outfits of the time period. Pardon me, back to the context of the story. So the Shipibo are on their own and they encounter this other people.
Yes.
And all of a sudden it's not just us. There are actual other human beings in the world. This is a completely paradigm-blowing experience. So, okay, well, what do we do? So they establish degrees of communication and decide, what are we going to do? There are other people in the world. How do we go about recognizing and honoring this situation? So, well, let's have a party. So, right? So the two groups show up, and the cultural differential here is that the Shipibo have alcohol. It's a local, like a sort of beer made from a manioc root, and the old women chew it up, and the mix of the human enzymes drives the yeast into an alcohol, something like this. So they spit this goo out into a big urn,
Yes.
and then bury it,
Yes.
and then after a certain amount of time, it reaches a fairly strong fermentation. And then when everyone's getting trashed on this stuff, it leaves a white alkali ring around the mouth. So the Shipibo show up all drunk out of their teeth, ready for a party. And all the Konibo show up all very prim and proper, perfect, right, very stately. So immediately there's a cultural differential that they have to get over,
Yes.
which apparently took quite a few centuries. But
Not much time at all.
right? So in the initial contact, it was decided, how are we going to name each other? So the Shipibo, it's decided by the other tribe that the Shipibo will be the Shipibo, which means monkey mouth. And it's in recognition of this little monkey called Shino, which lives in that region. And it's the cutest little face, very sympathetic looking little creature. And it's got this white ring around its mouth. And so, because of the drinking, leaving the white alkalides, they associated, okay, well, you guys all have monkey mouths, you're going to be the monkey mouth people from now on. And they're all smiling and have a good time with their white rims.
Yes.
So the Shipibo were mildly affronted by this process and explained to the Konibo, they're like, well, you're going to be the fish mouth people from now on, because they're all straight-mouthed and perfectly sober. So they become the monkey mouth and the fish mouth people.
Yes, yes.
So in my name, Shinobi, the Shino is a reference to that monkey, right? Which is like a little spider monkey type creature,
Yes.
as described. And so the association there is that I'm like that tribe, like that part of the tribal group of that region. And then the B was a personal addition in reference to this microscopic little bug. They're like tiny little black fly type things, the size of a piece of dust. And long story short, I got bitten in the middle of the night. The thing managed to get through my mosquito net, and despite having well tucked in cotton pants, it gives me this minuscule bite that within 24 hours had turned to a state that by the first night after this initial bite, it had traveled so far and so rapidly in external infection that I was drenched enough in my own blood that I had to take 3 showers that first night to get my clothes wet enough that I could peel them off of my body without taking top layers of skin off. I'll spare you the gory, horrific, several day details, but nonetheless, it was such an experience of understanding how even the finest little differential can be life or death. So in my name, that was added as sort of a reminder of know your place in the jungle, if you will. And in turn, I received other names here that nobody here can pronounce, and my name's here, nobody there can pronounce. So Shinobi became the happy medium to avoid the psychological dislocation of identifying with a different term when I go to each place. Right?
There's great symbols.
Yeah,
Incredible symbols, you know, like
yeah.
that you can. Everybody can understand by looking at the symbol. Where if it's just a word, it doesn't matter. But all the symbols that you put forward has created a story within me.
Nice.
The
Evoked.
question I have is, this sounds like a divine story. We all have stories, but when they become, they're bigger than our little self because they take us on the adventure of, and they shape us. And they also, at least for me, it inspires me. Thank you.
Cheers. Cheers. So if I may,
Yes.
in lieu of this, I would love to be able to share some internal personal technologies and understandings that others have given me that may be of value, right?
Please, yes.
So
For our audience, our divine audience, tune
Cheers.
in. And with that, it's a chance for you to tune up. Have some fun. Let's be a little divine.
Agreed.
Please.
Fun is ever the key to the force, right?
Yes.
In sort of in line
And
with
it's the love of force. Oh, wait. The force of love versus the love of force.
I'm going to leave you to untangle that one, mate.
Thank you, sir.
So In sort of keeping in line with the flavor, allow me to
Yes.
share some shamanic advice
Yes.
that has been offered to me. I use that term very loosely here.
A shaman is a teacher, or can you
Um,
define?
To my limited understanding,
Yes.
shaman is a word that was used originally by Russian anthropologists when they went up into the Irkutsk regions
Yes.
to study the local tribes there. And a shaman is an off-pronunciation of their term for a specific type of mystic that was part of their cultural region, part of the culture of that region.
And the mystic
and
is?
the term shaman means like sky person. And in that culture, their specific flavor of shamanism was that an individual would be, in essence, married to the spirit of a divine aspect that would come to them in private and teach them things. It's
Yes.
very different from other shamanic traditions, but this is where the term first got brought into, as far as I know, this is where the term first got brought into mass use in
Yes.
the West. And then this term, through Westerners, has then found application into local tribal systems.
Yes.
But it's an outside term, broadly used to describe like ethnic mystery school technologies, if you will,
Yes.
for lack of a more precise term at the moment.
Wonderful. And you're going to be sharing some of those mystery school, like
Well,
impersonal
bit of
technology.
advice
Yeah.
bits of advice that I've gotten from absolutely real characters that I've run into over the years, right?
Perfect.
So the first bit was there was a gentleman I met up in the Adirondacks, I think it was,
Yes.
named Tilu, Little Wolf, remarkable character. He's a Micmac Indian, thick tribal tattoos across his forehead and down the sides of his face. Rough-looking character, but utterly gentle in all his approach to reality. He'd spent over 10 years alone in the wilderness.
Yes.
He had met a brilliant woman somehow. I only got bits and pieces of this story.
Yes.
But she had basically helped him rehabilitate back into his humanity. He had to learn to speak again. It had been so long that literally his brain had rerouted, and he had to learn again the function of speech. So there was only so much we could communicate, but I had a little time with him, just me and him around the fire at one point, and in essence I asked him, what did you get from 10 years alone in the forest? So in classic First Nations plain and beautiful wisdom, he says to me, eat the earth. Which I would take not just as a metaphor, but a fundamental suggestion of personal practice. Right? So literally, go to a new place. If you go into a new place to do this, one can, to my limited understanding, one can actually gain a lot of internal flora and fauna that are required for existing in a biosystem.
Yes.
And the way to do this is don't take from the top of the dirt, dig deep underneath. You'll be able to smell the loam and the materials and where there's a bacterial layer, and you'll be able to sense underneath that where you get more mineral states. Again, this depends on the region. Some places don't eat it. Trust your instinct. Right? And we're not talking eat sand or rocks or this and that, but actual earth, right? So eat the earth,
Yes.
is the first one. Next, skipping quite a few years in my experience here, I find myself down in the jungle with this amazing and brilliant character he was what I would describe as a medicine man rather than a shaman. So within the context of their local shamanism, again, outsider term, one might think of the derivations of function for different shamans similar to the way that we would have a medical system. So one guy might be a pharmacist. It doesn't mean they know how to be a neurosurgeon.
Yes.
Right? So this gentleman's function was in essence what we could think of as a pharmacist. He didn't know necessarily how to diagnose or how to approach subtle energetic principles, but he knew what plant would have what effect. And once others had diagnosed a situation, they could come to him and ask him, and then he would be able to go and find the medicines.
Yes.
So, amazing character, Alberto. He was one of these guys that walking down the street, when he sees me and just says hello, it's like a hug from the universe that somehow validates my being more than anything else I could come up with. So in Supreme Excellence, let me just share this one
Yes.
quickly, and
Yes.
we'll move on.
Yes.
So we're sitting there, and he says to me, he goes, Shinobi, you're like us, right? You look like us, you move like us, you think like us, you process,
Yes.
and so on. You're like us. You understand the forest the way we understand the forest.
Yes.
But when we're sitting here and we're in private ceremony and it's dark and we can't see the color of your skin or the shape of your skull, we still know that you're not one of us. And the difference is that when you seek to understand, you look within. He said, we don't. We only look out. You know, very interesting differential, particularly between a lot of the both Western and Eastern traditions, where all the answers are internal and within. But this
Yes.
was a little more to sit and center in stillness with no aspect for reality to reflect off of, nothing that we're...
Almost no self.
In essence, yeah, and to simply allow the ocean of phenomenon around to guide us.
I have heard it said, you know, that we start off most often in human life, you know, as babies, you know, needy, you know, even selfish and self-centered, and self-centered, selfish, and then we also learn to be selfless in the giving of love and light and learning, and the balancing point, the gateway or the portal, the infinite point, as I've understood it or come to understand, is a selfness.
Nice
And
phrasing.
even though no self, no problem, in selfness, it's recognizing the self in everyone and being present, and then what's useful,
Yeah, totally understood.
what's divine.
Right. And for me,
Yes.
to recognize the interconnectedness of all things,
Yes.
and to recognize our place in the interconnectedness of the ocean of phenomenon,
Yes.
one must also come to a place of understanding of our own supreme sovereignty within the expression of that framework.
You know,
Supreme
Stephen,
excellence,
yes,
supreme
yes,
excellence.
So true. And in closing, dear Stephen, you know, some closing thoughts.
That's fascinating about just looking outwardly. Because I remember as a kid looking out the front window and just looking into the sky. And I was maybe 4 and my mother was beside me. And I was gone. There was just a blue sky. And I said to my mother, I said, we are conscience. I may have meant consciousness. And she says, where did you learn that word? I says, I just learned it right now. But it was an external surrender and coming to yourself by losing yourself, and a submission to everything inside, to everything you knew, and all there was the blue sky. So when you talk like that about them looking outwardly, and then you knew you were different looking inwardly, I recalled that. And when you talked about your experience, I was in the jungle beside you, and I tried it out. And then there was this opening of the sounds and the smells and the textures. And it took me back to what I'd said to my mother and what I experienced when I was 4. So thank you for evoking something that I've almost forgotten.
Thank you for sharing.
I almost forgot that, you know. So it's interesting that the coming together of our energies are evoking that picture right there. It's evoking that in me, you know.
And thank you to your 4-year-old self too. That's a remarkable and profound transmission of understanding to be able to put forward.
Yeah, and it's innate within all of us. But my mother, who Hilton knew, he knew my mother.
Rose.
Yeah, long before I met him. she had a profound love for all life. Like when she used to, this is your show. Do you want me to go on?
Yeah,
Okay.
please.
My mother, when she'd go to school and she'd come back and her knees would be scraped. And her mother, my grandmother, would say, "What are you doing?" She says, "I saw ants and I didn't want to step on them. And I fell. But it's better I experience the pain because it's an
Yeah,
accident.
beautiful.
But if
Right
I
on.
kill the ants," and that's like that external one with life, she says, if I kill the ants, then it's like, it's profoundly wrong and I lose my connection with spirit. And her mother was just dumbfounded. She didn't say you should or you shouldn't. So what we're doing here is a symphony of sounds and visions and textures that is evoking parts of me that I'd forgotten, and it's put forth now as a sacred gift to the circle that we produced here. Fascinating
Beautiful.
stuff.
Truly gentle men, divine dudes. Thank you so much for co-creating this sacred space.
Pleasure and an honor, sir.
And you.
Thank you,
Namaste. Namaste. And to all of you tuning in, thank you for tuning in. This is Hilton Milan for Divine Dude in all of us, and for you dames, the divine dame in you. So greatest love, and we'll see you in the light. Tune in, tune up, and keep letting your light shine. Thank you.